With the South African business environment becoming more competitive and the increased role and reach of competition authorities, it's expected that opportunities for entrepreneurs should increase. Now, is this a reality? Joining us now to unpack the issue, Viresh Ranchod, Principal Economist at Genesis Analytics, and of course, Jessica and Mark still with me. Mark, very quickly, let's talk about case law in South Africa and how that is changing to allow South Africans to embark on kind of multiple class action.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting things. I mean, this is very much uncharted waters, but it looks like that there's going to be a move toward increasing numbers of class action type actions taken in South Africa, and particularly there's some cases that are at the moment sitting with competition authorities in various stages, essentially looking at the bread industry at the moment, because obviously that was a very, very contentious issue historically, and then the mining sector where you've got the silicosis issues that are still plaguing a lot of these miners. So I think that there's legal case precedent to say that these are coming to South Africa. It may not happen this year, it may not happen next year, but there is definitely impetus toward strong consumer backlash in a class action type environment. And I think what that means, we've all seen the fines that have been put out by the competition authorities, but what you're seeing here is something that could not only come and be new claims, but could also go back and be retrospective, looking at what's happened with the claims historically in what we've seen already put through the competition authorities.
Viresh, thank you so much for joining us. Draw the line for us between the economics of competition and class action.
Essentially, it would relate to the same behaviour. You would have to find a contravention in terms of the Competition Act for firms to take forward a claim for damages in what we would call a civil court, like the High Court, etc. So the economics essentially would be the same. However, as Mark's highlighted, we haven't had that many cases to date, and I think some of the key reasons would be just the length of competition proceedings, which generally last for at least 2 or 3 years. And also, I think South Africa, we don't have an active consumer culture in terms of looking at firms and looking at their behavior. And I think it's important that it gets established, because primarily competition law looks at market failure, but the behavior of firms are more easily observable by consumers than they are by other competitors in the market, who would generally lodge complaints at the Commission, as opposed to a group of consumers who would lodge a complaint.
What is driving this increased consumer awareness? Is it social media? Is it people becoming more confident in their beliefs? What's attributing the increase? I
think maybe 2 factors. One is one could call it aggression, but I think it's just the fact that competition law is more prevalent now. The authorities have become a lot stiffer in terms of their penalties. There is a lot of media coverage. The other thing is that the authorities are assisting. Now, for example, using the bread case, authorities there, I think, assisted the consumers to lodge a class action. And so there is a shift towards recognizing that consumers need to be involved in the competition process. And in fact, during the hearings, a number of representations were made by consumer bodies and trade unions on behalf of consumers that were affected by it.
So of course it seems to be part of a broader theme. People are a lot more aware of anti-competitive behaviour, what it means and how it affects your life. So talk to us about some of the catalysts in the South African environment for a more competitive environment and how that connects with entrepreneurs.
Look, I think it is acknowledged that we have some of the more concentrated markets in the world. Historically, because of previous state ownership in some of our large enterprises, with the results, for example, like SAA, that they don't perform well when exposed to open markets or to competition. So I think entrepreneurship is one element, but I think competition law on its own can't solve the major issues around freeing markets up. However, there are instances, examples would be in the case of an old decision involving Sasol Nitro, where the Commission intervened and said that they would have to divest certain plants and they would have to only operate at the upstream level. And in that case, it would free up the downstream market for new entrants to come in. I mean, a recent decision involving Telkom is a landmark one, because Telkom was it's still currently state-owned, but it was the monopoly. And essentially what the recent decision has meant is that they were engaged in prohibited practices, which hopefully, if they stop, I say hopefully because it's on appeal at the appeal court. But if they find that they have contravened, they would have to stop these practices, and this should really open the market up, especially at the downstream level, to new entrants and new players. So I think competition law plays an important role, but I think entrepreneurs to a large extent, South Africa are hindered because a lot of these markets are quite concentrated.
Yes, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we are getting through. We're going through the stage where South African businesses are being broken up. You've had very much vertical, horizontal, diagonal integration, whatever you want to call it. I mean, because of this concentration of wealth, you haven't been able to get new players into the market. And I think that, you know, people are also looking at it, stakeholders are looking and saying, do I really want to be exposed to the risk? I mean, you know, if you have a couple £100 million fine, it burns you. And I think that you're starting to say, what are we good at? What can we focus on? And I think that also companies have been maybe not tentative, but they've often focused on doing the things, you know, eventually competition authorities will get to us. And I think that what's happened is that it's sped up in the last couple of years, and it's you look at the construction sector, you look at the media sector, you look at the financial services, there's this underlying attitude toward competitiveness that is starting to come through in South Africa, and I do think it'll open up for entrepreneurs going forward.